Hi class! Today I'm going to show you a demonstration on the wheel. First I grab a towel so that I don't get clay splattered all over my pants. And then I've wedged a piece of clay about the size of a baseball really nicely, and then I'm patting it into a circle like this. You need to throw it down hard on the wheel in the center as much as possible. Pat it in the center if you didn't get it quite exact, and then while it's dry, attach the clay to the wheel head. I'm going to move the wheel so that you can see this from a better angle. Once you've attached it to the wheel, then you can wet your hands completely. It's really important to lock your elbows to your thighs or your knees or the edge of the wheel itself, and keep your hands as steady as possible. Right now I'm moving the clay up by just pressing my hands together, pushing them towards each other, makes the clay go upwards. This side of my hand, if I press it down into the clay will be forced down and out, so my outside hand is going to be pressed out to the side. I don't want the clay to get too out and in, so I try to keep my hands as steady as possible. This is called centering the clay. You might spend most of your time in class working on centering. It is the most important part because if you don't get the clay centered, everything else will fall apart. So if the clay isn't moving side to side and it's staying very still, it's okay to open. So now I'm opening the clay because I have centered the piece. Some people open with their thumbs, like I'm showing there. I like to open with my 2 fingers. Again, look at my elbows, they're touching my knees. So at some point when you've opened it, you can decide when that point is. You want to stop the wheel, take your needle tool, and then poke it right in the middle so that it touches the wheel head. Put your finger next to it and see just how thick it is. You couldn't really see in that image, but it was about a 1/4 inch thick, so that's a good size. I'm going to continue bringing my fingers towards my body, and that will widen that area. At this point, I noticed that there was a bubble in the clay, which threw it off a little bit, and I was trying to save it. Bubbles can be formed by wedging incorrectly or not wedging at all, so it's an important step to wedge. Unfortunately, it's easier just to restart than to try to save a bubble because once it's off center, it's not going to be centered again, really. So you're better taking it off, especially if it's a big bubble like this one was. So I made the choice to just start over. Believe me, it seems like you have something really awesome started, but it's going to be quicker if you just take the wire tool, go underneath it, and take it off and start again. I hope you noticed that when I restarted, I dried off the wheel, I re-wedged the clay, and then I started over. Don't use a super wet piece of clay. Wedge it a few times to make it dry, and then repeat the steps that I showed you at the beginning. You're going to press the clay up and down. Typically I'll do it more where I'll bring the clay up and down, up and down. It's kind of like wedging the clay on the wheel, so if I mess up, I tend to do that action a bit more than I generally do if it's a fresh piece of clay. Think about moving the clay instead of the clay moving you. So you want your hands to be as steady as possible and force the clay into a centered position. I'm going to speed up this part of the video just a little bit to move on to the next part, which is pulling up the clay. I want you to notice how I position my knuckle and my finger on the inside. Both work together and I stay as steady as possible, like right now, and I'm bringing that clay up. I pinch at the bottom, so finger and knuckle, and bring it straight up, very steadily. Now I'm going to fast forward again, show you another key tip that will help you out. It's my baby in the background, excuse me. Let's say you pull it up and you don't like the look of your rim, it's a little bit off. You can use your needle tool to go around on the outside and actually cut your pottery lip so that it's even again. The thickness will change if it's not centered, but at least the height will remain the same. You want to make sure that you add water and compress your rim again, though. That's pretty important. If you notice that your piece is too wide, you can narrow it by keeping your hands, as I'm doing right now, together and then just bringing it up. This has got a little bit wobbly on me because I did it too quickly, so you just want to move it up a little bit at a time. I should have done it twice instead of one big motion. But you just keep your hands steady again. Everything's steady on the wheel. I even think it's important not to look at other people around you if you're on the wheel, because everything should be so focused. Your attention, your eyes, your hands, everything should be staring at that wheel head so that you're not moving around as much as possible. So now I have to fix my mistake a little bit. There is a little bit of playroom with fixing a mistake. If it's off center, if there's a bubble, I think it's too hard to fix, but if it's kind of twisted, I found that I can save it a little bit. So this piece I actually saved. You can see how it's pretty wobbly right now, but I fixed it up a little bit. So always play with your clay, especially if you're just beginning. It doesn't hurt to just play with the clay. You can change your shape by how you position your hands on the inside and the outside. Your hands on the inside and you push out, then it's going to make the clay go out. Your hands on the outside and it pushes in, it's going to make the clay go in. So once you have a shape that you've started, a height or a width, then you can adjust for the actual shape that you want. I tend to like my coffee mugs to be kind of wide at the bottom. This one was just a fun shape to make. But I like them wide at the bottom and more narrow at the top, just so that my coffee stays hotter longer. This isn't the greatest example because normally I make the lip a little bit more narrow. But as before, I had said that it was getting a little bit wobbly, so I decided to take it off now instead of later. So when you decide to take off your piece, you need your wooden knife, clean it off, and go around the edge because you typically have more clay resting at the bottom, and that's a bad sign of a pottery piece. You don't want it to be super heavy at the bottom. You want it to be just as light as at the bottom as it is at the top. Then you can get the wire tool and put the wire tool underneath it. Make sure you push really hard into the wheel head and make the wire as flat as possible. I like to do it as many times as it takes for the clay to move. I hope you saw that I added a little bit of water with my sponge so that the water underneath helps it slide like that. Then you can go over, grab a wear board, and you're going to place your piece on your wear board. And congratulations, you have made a piece of pottery on the wheel. Please make sure that you don't just sit it out and let it dry. You want to wrap it up with a bag so you can come back to trim it. I'll do another video on trimming later, or I'll be happy to show you how to trim in class live. But there's your piece. Congratulations. Woohoo! Next, you got to clean the wheel. I start by cleaning all of my tools first so that they're good to go for the next person or myself. Then you're going to take a big sponge, or in this case, scrape off the wheel head, I guess. Put all that extra clay. Feel for it in the bucket as well. Take all that extra little chunky bits of clay, put them together and kind of form an arch so that they start to dry out. You're going to put this back in the bag, but you don't want to put it back really soggy. Let it dry for a little bit, and then at the very end of class, don't forget about it. Put it back in the bag. I'm going to get a big sponge now because that's going to make the biggest difference. I add more water to the wheel. If you already have a ton of water in there, you don't have to add more water. And then I'm going to wipe up all the clay, put it in my bucket as much as possible. Every little bit, the outside, the inside. Yes, you'll have to scrub the wheel. You want it to be nice, spanking clean for the next person. Please do this. And then you'll go over to the sink and you'll carefully dump out your bucket, clean out your bucket, fill it with some fresh water from a fresh, clean bucket. And you're going to bring that back to your wheel and pour a little bit of that fresh water in to the area that you just cleaned. Because if I left it like this, there would be a residue on the wheel that would stay there. And I don't want that to happen. You want it to be nice and clean. So it does not take long at all to go get that water, come back, and then pour it on. Right now I'm going to move that clay though. Just like that. It's not a lot of water. And then you wipe everything up, and it's perfect. Like, there's no problems. It's not a big deal. Please do this. It's important. It's a small chunk of your grade. So you get 10 minutes on the wheel to clean up, 5 to 6 minutes when you're hand building. So that should be enough time as long as you're efficient. And use a big sponge. I see some people try to clean their whole wheel with a small sponge, and I'll laugh at you because it doesn't make any sense. Your big sponge can get 10 times more work done than any little sponge. Your little sponge is just meant to help you while you're working on the wheel. So that's it. I hope you got all the information you needed, but if you didn't, ask me for questions. I'm happy to come over and help you. It might be a struggle. In fact, it mostly is a struggle if it's your first time on the wheel. It takes a lot of practice, but it's really awesome because once you get it, you get it. Last thing, don't forget to turn off the wheel, and then if you're done for the day, stack your chairs all over together in the corner of the wheel area. That's what I'm going to do next, right before I leave. So, happy throwing, and have a great day.